multi-touch attribution shouldn't be about like these like tiny inches. It's about looking at the big picture. Where can we deterministically say, this sucks? And where can we say, we're making money when we do these things? And then focus on like shifting from between those two outliers. That's where you really gain value from attribution.
Welcome back to another episode of Attribution Nation podcast. I am joined here today by Steffen Hedebrandt, who is one of the co-founders of Dreamdata and currently runs marketing there as the CMO. Steffen, it's really good to see you again. It's been a little while. So everybody welcome Steffen from lovely Denmark.
Drew, it's great to talk with you again. It's been a while. In fact, we've actually known each other for some time now, and it's so cool to see that we can continue to evolve this attribution industry together.
Yeah, likewise. I think it was 2021 when I came out to Copenhagen and visited the Dreamdata office.
The COVID days and the dark times of winter, even in Copenhagen, I believe it was.
Yeah, it was great. So, Steffen, I'm really glad to have you join this episode. So, in this mini series, what we're doing in this mini series is we're helping people understand how to be successful with an implementation of different attribution platforms.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit more around, what clients do to be successful with the platform in terms of like, what are the things you have to have right in your organization? So to talk a little bit about that and just kind of set the stage within Dreamdata, how have you kind of supported customers being successful with Dreamdata in the past?
Yeah, in multiple ways. Back when we were just a few people, we would be getting constantly on customer calls, explaining one by one how you do things, what you should focus on, how to onboard, etc. Now, today in marketing, we're a bit more focused on, you can say, providing the one-to-many answers to our customers. So that is kind of what are the questions that the salespeople are being asked. What are the things that customer success needs to teach customers in a one-to-many fashion? So we're really focused on these, like the core questions that our customers need to understand and to answer them in a really good, scalable way. So that comes in many shapes and forms. It's blog posts. It's the weekly live conversation we do with fellow B2B marketers. It's something that we've introduced called one-to-many trainings. So it's particularly like one use case or one report of Dreamdata where we basically invite any user of that report to join, no matter the company that they are in. And I share then best practices for this one report to 50 or 100 people or whoever, how many joins. So it's really that focus on taking the things that like consistently come up and doing really good, thorough answers. So it constantly becomes resources that the sales team and the customer success team can utilize.
Awesome. So while we're not going to do just a demo or a pitch of Dreamdata, I do want to at least give our listeners some sort of base level knowledge of what your product does. So with that being said, what does Dreamdata do better than your competition?
I'm really glad you sent me this question up front, Drew, because it depends on who we're talking about. But I kind of wrote down 3 or 4 things, and given you being the professor of attribution here, then you tell me whether it's true or not. But I think to talk about a Dreamdata, what really makes us special is 3 or 4 things, at least when we think about differentiation. I think one of the first things that I think about is our data platform that has really built with that in mind, that first of all, it needs to become a data platform. And we didn't set out to just deliver on one feature, like, for example, attribution, and then everything from there becomes painful because you just did that narrow split of solving one question. We actually built it to become a very scalable, automatic data model for our customers. So what that means, as how you can see that expressed today, is that we are able to go down that kind of modern product-led free trial path, where our customers do not have to put their signature on anything before they have a proven free trial that it actually works. And we're only able to deliver this because the platform is so scalable now that we've built proprietary integrations to anything we need to pull in and model. So users just flick it on, we pull the data, and within 24 hours, they have the first data model set up. Now that's done. We have just recently introduced something that has been a big stride for the last year, which is called the Data Hub. And this Data Hub has really been focused on completely empowering our customers to manage, model, and map all the data that they want to pull in. There will always be data that they want into their reports, the data that they want to keep out. And what you see across, I think, practically any other vendor in this space is that you just pull in everything from every system. But we actually put that power just straight in the hands of the people that are orchestrating the data. That also means that you can do attribution model exclusions yourself. You can build the stage models, the business results that you want to measure yourself. You can map the UTMs within the product. You can create your own content categories. You can control the data model schedule. You can preview the model. So you being a OG visible user as well know that sometimes you need to wait 7 days to see the data here. In Dreamdata, there's a button you click, and you get the answer immediately to how much is in this stage that you've just built. So it's very fast and very empowering of the user.
Awesome. I do think, I think one of the things that I've always been a fan of with your platform is the breadth and depth of the integrations that you have available. So talking about that data hub and just how you've got so many different integrations available to you, like that's something that I've always been a big fan of with your platform.
If I can continue a bit, Drew, then we're based in Europe. So that means perhaps higher demands for privacy compliance. And you see this also reflected in how we track for our users. You know, any B2B attribution vendor will need to kind of track what's going on the website. We've built our own proprietary tracking script that is able to track all the users in a privacy compatible fashion. There's other vendors in this industry that dares to put like fingerprinting technology on their websites, even though it's impossible for users to know whether they're being tracked or to request deletion. And if you get caught, which has been cases in the past about it, the GDPR fines are 2 to 4% of your yearly revenue. So even though let's call it a gray zone, it's definitely not something we dare putting on top of our customers' responsibility. On top of that, the tracking script actually nowadays offers 2 extra features that are super nice. One is that it allows for hybrid intent, meaning that with Dreamdata out of the box, we give you IP to company resolution. But if you're a 6 Sense customer or Clearbit customer or whatever you also use, you just keep adding the intent sources to Dreamdata, and then we can take all that IP to company data and make the resolution even stronger. And then the last component that I would just mention about our tracking script is that it's also able to just run cookie-less, meaning that if people reject the tracking, we resolute to our company level and just say somebody from this company at this day were on your website without doing that ugly fingerprint that is very questionable when it comes to privacy.
Yeah, GDPR is the other thing that comes up, at least for me, when I'm talking to an organization. If GDPR is like a really, really important thing for them, then Dreamdata is always coming to mind for me, because you all are more, I think, just careful around GDPR than others, and more just even just the fact that you're based in the EU, as we've seen from some legal rulings, it makes you more GDPR compliant than other platforms. So anytime GDPR comes up, Dreamdata comes to mind, of course.
We're born into it. We can't help not to care about it. I would also be a super bad CMO if I didn't say that we were the best rated B2B attribution vendor on G2. So people can go and read the reviews there for sure.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about what makes organizations successful. And what I'm going to do, this next question is super broad. So it can go a lot of different directions, but when Dreamdata is set up in the best way possible, what does that setup include? What does that setup look like?
Yeah, actually, I've thought about this in 2 ways, because there's, and you know this more than most, that there's 2 things that you need to succeed. There's the technical setup, And then there's the culture shift that needs to come along with it within the organization that the product is bought to. When we talk about if we take the technical part first, basically the attribution vendor needs access to anything that has a digital reflection about customer journeys, about your go-to-market. And like the main sources here are typically the CRM, the marketing automation platform, the ad platforms, calling software, outreach software, CS software, and ad platforms. That kind of broad scope, that's it. You might also be doing like physical events or webinar, etc. And then you can talk about getting that in there as well. But in general, you need to think about anything you do in your go-to-market. You need to pull it out of whatever silo that it lives within, and then it needs to run into the attribution data model at best multiple times per day. When that's set up, one thing is that now you actually know what works, and you can focus on scaling the good parts and stopping the bad parts of your go-to-market. But the next step is here kind of also what you're seeing a lot of these next generation attribution platforms focusing on is actually, now that we know what works, we need to intelligently feed that back into other systems. Like one thing being like the ad platforms, where we can help the ad algorithms to buy clicks for you smarter, because we are in B2B, and B2B is not about you bought a click and did it arrive at your website. It's about you bought a click and did they buy something 6 or 12 months from now? And that kind of offline conversion, I think LinkedIn calls it their conversion API. This is what you can fill with attribution data as well. The same thing with audiences, because we sit on all the go-to-market data. We know if companies have been on your website, we know if they've been on G2, we know how many LinkedIn ads they've been served. So do we want to make salespeople aware about this, or is it time to increase the ad pressure? Is it time that an email goes out? So it's about activating the data in the right fashion. And then the last component, which I teased before, is really when Dreamdata works well, that's when the organization adopts the product. And that means that it's not just one mad scientist that thinks, hey, it's actually cool to know what works and what doesn't. It means that the marketing team should start to think about, whenever they do something, set up and save a report inside of Dreamdata, where you know that you'll be able to follow this cohort of activity. Now, whether that is a webinar or a piece of content or an ad campaign, that's up to them. But you need to think about, as soon as it launches, are we able to track it? And you also need that learning loop on top of this activity. So you then also need to agree in your team to get together next month, and then you open these reports and you analyze, okay, if we think about like a normal distribution here of our activities, what are the things that we at least have zero proof that it works? And what are the activities that we do where we have very strong proof that it works? And then you want to focus your money and your resources to those parts where you like really can see that it works. So I'd say technical setup, get anything that touches the customer journeys, activate the data, whether that's analysis or putting it into other systems or actions, and then demanding that your company also adjusts to this new information.
Ooh, I love the adoption one. That's a big thing. I mean, we see organizations that buy these platforms all the time, and then they just fail to adopt them. And
absolutely,
it's a challenge. And I think that one of the things that we advocate for, but obviously it's not every organization is going to do this well, but we advocate for organizations to start, once you're on a platform such as Dreamdata, start building that measurement strategy into your campaign planning process. So knowing up front, because you mentioned it, like, well, when we run a webinar, when we launch the webinar, we need to go build the report that's going to report on the webinar, right? Well, if I don't know what my measurement and reporting strategy is when I plan the campaign, what report am I building, right? If I don't know who my audience is, what are we measuring and when are we measuring it? You know, if I measure pipeline against a campaign that's targeting net new records into the database, and I'm measuring pipeline 30 days after the campaign launches, I should expect to see nothing. But if I haven't thought that through first, I might look at that and go, well, there's no pipeline here, it's failing, No. It's not that it's failing. You're measuring pipeline too soon because of who the audience is. So I think that's one of the things that we advocate for that really, really affects that adoption piece. But that is adoption is just so critical.
It's been such a big focus for us to improve this. I think when was it, the Ukraine war started, like the spring of 22, where kind of tech funding freezed up, and inflation escalated. Then you saw kind of just a lot of companies panicking, and we also had a rough quarter or two at that point where we just told each other, okay, if we're gonna come out stronger out of this, it's really about getting our product adopted heavily within the organizations, and that has meant that we've been producing content, beefed up the account management, the customer success, focused on releasing features that are for everyone and not just for an enterprise layer. And I'm really proud to say that, like, nowadays the average active, there's I think like 96% of our companies are active every week, and there's an average of 6 users per account that are active every week. So we've really succeeded in getting a high adoption, but it has also come from a lot of work to actually make that happen.
Yeah, no, those numbers are great. I mean, that's fantastic. All right, we're going to move on to the next section here. And this is kind of like our rapid fire questions. Everybody that we're talking to in this mini series is getting the exact same set of questions. And these are in the weeds questions. This is like detailed, granular stuff here. So, Steffen, we know that UTMs are important to being successful with a marketing attribution platform. What are Steffen's UTM best practices?
It's 100% UTM every freaking thing that you do in your organization. You cannot have a link anywhere without a UTM in it, because it's that simple. Because the only way that we can improve what we do as marketers, as business people in general, is to understand what we did yesterday, what that impact had on today. And in the digital world, UTMs is what guides you on what worked and what didn't. So take this to heart, that you cannot send an email, you cannot have an email signature, you cannot have an ad campaign that doesn't have UTMs, because if they don't, you have no chance of doing all the other nice things that you want to be doing in the future. With that kind of ran over, then it's kind of also there's discipline of what UTMs do you use. Make sure you use kind of like a standard way of setting UTMs. There's great UTM.io. There's other kind of vendors that just helps you follow a certain structure. I know you probably also help clients just set up a spreadsheet where you define what is it, what does it mean, etc. So one, really be extremely strict about UTM everything, and then afterwards follow like a convention that everybody agrees to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think UTM everything, and then that discipline in making sure that you're using things consistently and that you've got some sort of a UTM builder tool, whether that's a spreadsheet or whether that's a more advanced platform like UTM.io, something that helps people be consistent. I always say my number one rule with UTMs is consistency. You can break every other rule as long as you abide by this one rule. You're probably going to be pretty okay.
Yeah, and then I would say at least most ad platforms are getting better and better nowadays at allowing for dynamic UTM. So what they actually give you is quite decent, but do pay attention, because it's not everyone is as good as Google to do it. So if you have big ad spend going into kind of let's say less conventional platforms, make sure to check how the UTM setup works there.
Absolutely. All right, next one. Oh, go ahead. Do you have more?
Yeah, I just want to do one plug for Dreamdata here, because we actually offer a UTM mapper that allows you to kind of correct the past as well. So if somebody was sloppy and didn't set UTMs the right way, we can say, okay, if it looks like this, now put it into this box. And you have a lot of marketers that are just like busy, and then, I'm guilty of that as well, that it's not always perfect, but this is actually a fun functionality to map UTMs into the right buckets after the fact as well.
Okay. Awesome. Love that. All right, moving on to the next question here. Cost imports. Cost. It's is probably the biggest pain in the ass when it comes to any marketing attribution system, because costs have to get, in some cases, manually imported for certain things. You can't automatically bring costs in for things like trade shows. So what are Steffen's recommendations for how marketers should be keeping track and inputting costs into Dreamdata?
I would say, if we start with the business perspective of cost, why is it that we should care about cost? It is because good business, good marketing is when you produce more revenue than what it costs you to produce it. So it's not for us to be the janitors or the angry old men saying you need to put in cost. It's actually because we want to make sound decisions of, if we have 3 alternatives, where can we get the most revenue out for the dollar we invested? So the way we've been approaching this at Dreamdata, luckily all the ad spend comes directly from the digital sources. What we then do whenever we have anything of significance is that we actually use a spreadsheet to note time, channel, campaign, etc., and the spend that you did. And that gets linked through us, like just basically a Google Sheet, and uploaded to Dreamdata. And then you're able to take any of the things that didn't automatically connect cost and revenue. You can connect those two components together. So I'd say where you should focus on cost is obviously where the amount is big enough for it to matter. And secondly, you want to have that amount in order to actually make better decisions on where to place the next chat.
Got it. So do you recommend, what tends to work best for Dreamdata customers? Do you recommend that organizations input the spend as they're spending it? Do you think like monthly? Do you think quarterly? What's like the sweet spot for Dreamdata customers?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what would be the most regular use case. I mean, the spend, if you put it in one day, the next day it's in the data model. So it's a little bit also relying on when do you have time to do it? When do you need to do the analysis? It's super straightforward that it just type in these things to a Google Sheet, and it next time the data model runs, then it's in there. So it's very simple. Obviously, I think all of us can kind of forget stuff, and you get busy and then you don't get it done, and that's equally a mistake. So whether that's a monthly or a quarterly thing, then do have a structure. Maybe just put up a monthly calendar structure to make sure that all the offline costs get put into the model.
Yeah, we typically recommend monthly, but every platform's different, and so it might be, for Dreamdata, it might be a little bit easier to do it more frequently than monthly, but we typically recommend monthly. So next one. So Steffen, I know that Dreamdata can ingest data from Salesforce campaigns and use that in the attribution model. So tell us a little bit about how Dreamdata does that, and then we'll talk a little bit about Steffen's best practices for campaigns as it relates to Dreamdata.
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, Salesforce campaigns and the equal parts in the other CRM systems are crucial parts of understanding what goes on, whether it's a steak dinner, it's a shipping of a gift, or it's attendance at a webinar. It's possible to log all these kind of offline activities using the Salesforce campaigns and other things like it. So it's a crucial part of understanding B2B customer journeys, because if you don't give all these activities a digital reflection, we as attribution vendors are not actually able to plot them into the B2B customer journeys of your customers. Now, the way that we have empowered our users at Dreamdata to handle this is that we've actually built what we call an event builder within our data hub, where you're actually able to filter every single campaign that you have and decide whether you want it into your model or not. And you can say the steak dinner is field marketing in this city, or it's from this source or this campaign. So we give you high flexibility in how you want to deal with these campaigns that you've set up.
So then within the event builder, do I have the ability to say, so for example, when I create a campaign around an event, let's just use a steak dinner, because you talked about that, and I'm a big fan of steak dinners. So let's say I'm running a steak dinner, and I've got, 25 people I want to invite to get, 10 people to attend. And invited is one of my campaign member statuses, so I know who I invited. And then attended is another one of my campaign member statuses to know that who attended. So in the event builder, I'm assuming I can differentiate those member statuses to say, hey, I don't want to factor in invitations into my attribution model, but I do want to factor in only those attendances into my attribution model. Is that Dreamdata can do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just point and click. The same with like filtering calls, which might also be like a classic attribution challenge. You can, if you know how long the call lasted, if it's a 10-second call, 0 attribution. But if it's a 100 seconds or 200-second call, then you could map that call into the contact level that then gets mapped into the account-based journey as well. So like it's really complete control of everything that sits in the CRM, and then your ability to map that into your customer journeys.
So I think one of the things that's really important to get right then is when we run campaigns, we've got to run them in a consistent manner so that when we create a rules-based system that says, hey, if campaign member status equals invited, skip it. But if campaign member status equals attended, cool, include that in the attribution model. We've got to make sure that we're using campaign member statuses consistent. And like, we're not using 18 different permutations of the word attended, right? Like we got to have a pretty consistent naming convention there, right?
Absolutely. And it seems like you talk from firsthand experience here, Drew, that things can go wrong if you actually don't. If you just name it like test 1 or test 2, you need to name it something that is consistent and recognizable for when you want to sit and map that data.
Okay, perfect. So I think that the big takeaway there is just being consistent in the way that you're running campaigns, and that's
and use it.
Yeah, that too. Yes, make sure that you're syncing that data to campaigns, and then make sure that it's coming over consistently. Absolutely. What's if there's one thing that you see that in terms of like the Dreamdata setup, what is the one thing that you see that is like the most critical thing to get right? Or to phrase that another way, what's the most common thing that people that fail with Dreamdata, what's the most common thing that they get wrong?
What generally is kind of can be the kind of the thing that takes a bit time in the onboarding is if the organization don't have a unified way to talk about business outcomes, or a unified way, or the marketers don't know how the actual sales funnel look like. So what is a marketing qualified lead? How is that actually expressed in the CRM? What is a sales opportunity? What is new business is kind of easier, but a lot of times you'll see companies that have, if not misaligned, then not at least educated everybody about what does business results look like. And what that means is that inside of Dreamdata, we allow you to flip through your whole funnel from MQL to sales accepted lead to sales opportunities to new business or recurring business or lost deals or whatever it is. But if you don't know how that is actually expressed inside your CRM, it's very hard for us to enable you to go from looking at clicks and leads to actually looking at sales opportunity generated. So this is typically here where we need to help some of the customers educate themselves a little bit about like business outcomes and what you actually want to be measuring.
That's a good one. I think that
associated to that, Drew, sorry to interrupt, is kind of also what are you willing to pay for these business outcomes? Because where attribution platform becomes very tangible is when you know what you're willing to pay. What can you pay for an MQL? What can you pay for a sales accepted lead? What can you pay for a sales opportunity? Because when you have that CPA and then you just browse your eyes through the campaigns, it's very easy to draw the right conclusion. So I'd say, what is business success? And then what are you willing to pay for this business success? If they can clarify those two questions up front, then they move really fast.
No, I love that, because what is business success is really, it's a question that a lot of marketers don't know the answer to, or they might get it wrong, because a lot of marketers are so focused on campaign level metrics like engagement and impressions and clicks and conversion rates that the business outcome itself remains a little bit hidden and gets missed a lot of the time. So I think that's a great one.
I think for us, luckily we kind of like 80-90% inbound driven. So customers that comes to us have a desire to be more data driven, to be more focused on revenue from their marketing activities. So they're kind of willing to engage into these discussions. But it is kind of changing the organization's mindset as well, from moving away from collecting leads to producing revenue that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, we see a lot of organizations where marketing organizations get on an attribution platform like Dreamdata, and suddenly their entire approach to how they think about marketing is shifted to a more data-driven and financially driven approach to marketing versus, the what they were doing before, which is like driving leads. So I think
that's the fantastic thing of being part of. I think you know that as well. Like now the markets can actually celebrate that there's real impact here, and they can be accountable for a certain percentage of the pipeline because they actually now know what percentage of the pipeline that they've been the source of, and people get promoted from these things. They become successful in their careers when they're actually able to show hardcore business results from their efforts.
Absolutely. We see it all the time. Yeah. All right. Last question in this section. So how should marketers, this one's going to be a little bit tough for you. So how should marketers think about reporting ROI on things like brand or some of the other typically hard to measure channels like a podcast, for example?
Yeah.
How do you recommend marketers kind of approach that and think about that?
Yeah, obviously I'm not the most or the best one to answer that question. So let me just get that out there. But I would say it depends on what we're talking about. If we take the digital bucket, the digital brand exercises, I think a ton of things can be measured. So anything that do leave behind a digital reflection, should trickle down to revenue, or it didn't work. I'd give you this rule of thumb. If you're in doubt whether something works and you can't find any proof that it was a good spend of money, it wasn't. It's not working. So for the digital activities, whether you call it a brand campaign or an awareness campaign, if you're not able to connect that down into pipeline, you didn't do a good thing. Now, that said, there's a lot of stuff that makes a lot of sense that are hard to measure. I pretty much recommend anybody I speak with to have a folder of qualitative proof that your marketing activities were great. Now, whether that's a mention of, the Attributed podcast, or if it's somebody in a Slack channel or somebody who comments, "This is the greatest G2 celebration I've ever seen," continue to take those screenshots and build a qualitative folder and share those examples with your organization, because that helps justify how or the marketing activities you do. Then on top of this, I would say it also depends a little bit about how much money you spend, because we really heavily push a culture of having fun, but fun doesn't have to be insanely expensive. I'm gonna say I don't know if you saw it, but my colleague Laura had a little surprise for me on Times Square a year ago, where she filmed me with the back against one of the big billboards with some kind of copy about what we do. And my first thought was, "Laura, what's this? What's the price? Why did you do this?" But then I found out she only spent $500 making this little surprise. And the content worked beyond anything that we could ever pay for, because it was fun to do a surprise. But it wasn't very expensive to do this surprise. So pay it, if you do really, really big bets, make sure you have some sort of measurement thinking going into it, because we can't just throw money out the window. Then they're spent better elsewhere. And, there's others that do this a lot better than us, like brand measurement, brand lift, all those kind of things that more traditional media monitoring things that you can do.
Yeah, I think I love the idea of taking screenshots of things like G2 reviews, because G2 reviews are something that's just, it's difficult to get that to show up in attribution data, right? But it is important information to have when you get those good reviews, and can help validate if we've spent effort and money cultivating G2 reviews. It can help validate that effort and that spend through a mechanism that may not show up in the attribution data as well as we would like it to.
Yeah, actually, Drew, we were actually part of launching multi-touch attribution together with G2, just a month back. So if you're subscribing to their intent data now, then we can put that into the B2B customer journeys as well. So was it a category level view? Did somebody look at your profile? Did somebody compare you against one of your competitors? This data now gets mapped into journeys as well. And you'd see that particularly the compare event, people typically buy, I think it was 72 days after that event happening. So this is something you really want to, ads on salespeople, call them. So there is for this particular activity. And I think the good part here is most vendors are going down the API route nowadays. They're actually trying to make their data available to other vendors. And, by that also enabling vendors like us trying to map customer journeys to do that better. So though there's talk about the dark funnel, which is real, it's actually also getting lighter and lighter because people understand that we cannot be our own island. We need to get our data into other places as well.
Yeah. No, I love that feature that you guys turned on recently with G2. I mean, I love that. I think that was really smart. All right. We're going to move into misconceptions. So we've got 2 misconceptions that, Steffen, I'd like for you to potentially help us address here. So number 1, a lot of organizations are apprehensive about moving on to attribution because they don't think their data is perfect. Do you need perfect data to get onto a marketing attribution platform?
Yeah, I think you know the answer, Drew. Absolutely not. I think it's more about committing to a process of constantly wanting to get better. There's a lot of vendors who we're dealing with it every day. We have hundreds and thousands of customers where we take all this go-to-market data and automatically sort it and clean it up. So no, the data doesn't have to be perfect. What we can do for you is we can help spot if something is completely missing or there's a really bad behavior on something and tell you, oh, you probably want to do this a bit different. So absolutely no need for perfect data. But I would say that's probably also where it can go wrong sometimes if people are looking for perfections, if they're optimizing like single digit things where like HubSpot says 10, but you say 11 or whatever it is. Attribution, multi-touch attribution shouldn't be about like these like tiny inches. It's about looking at the big picture. Where can we deterministically say, this sucks? And where can we say, we're making money when we do these things? And then focus on like shifting from between those 2 outliers. That's where you really gain value from attribution.
Yeah, I think that focus on 1s and 2s is so debilitating for organizations that try to do that because you're focused on the wrong things. You're spending too much time worrying about something that in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter. Because when you take a big data approach to multi-touch attribution, which is what it is, it's a large statistical model, 1s and 2s are irrelevant because you're talking about thousands and thousands of touch points. So why do 1s and 2s matter? They just don't. So I think that's a great takeaway for listeners of this podcast is single digit numbers and discrepancies in the data don't matter. Just skip it. It's not going to
for the commas. Yeah.
It's not going to change the way you evaluate the data. It's just not. All right. The second misconception. How big of a team is needed to manage dream data?
Basically, you don't need a team to manage dream data. I think you need a manage to kind of do the cultural shift. Everything runs completely automatic. And as I've said several times today, there's a data hub where you can like point and click and fix everything yourself nowadays. So what you need is somebody who drives the cultural implementation that we have this tool now. When we do activities, set up a report that monitors the cohort. Let's have a monthly meeting where we look at revenue attribution. Where did we get our leads from? Where did we get our newest customers from? Are there any things that looks repeatable here? Or are there any of our big efforts that are not showing up here? Are we not tracking it, or is it just not working? So it's more I think we're by far the easiest vendor to set up nowadays. But for any vendor, either through customer success or great consultants like yourself, they can get that up and standing for you. the harder part is the cultural shift that you need to make happen in your organization as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of just organizations that think you need like an army of data scientists to make this work well. And you just don't. You need somebody to oversee the platform and be responsible to make sure that the data is correct. But outside of that, I mean, you don't need an army of analysts or an army of data scientists to manage these platforms. You just don't. Okay, so with everything that you said, what I want to do is I want to take a quick moment to kind of recap some of the things that I took away from this conversation that I think our listeners should take away. So number one, ensure that there's a plan for organizational adoption. If you're going to get onto a multi-touch attribution platform like Dreamdata, you've got to have a plan for adoption. If you don't have a plan for adoption, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with a platform that just sits on the shelf and ends up as shelfware. So make sure that you've got a plan for organizational adoption. The next one is UTM everything. Don't overthink it. Just if you're placing a link somewhere, just put a damn UTM on it. That's it. And then follow a discipline so that everybody can be consistent. UTM everything and then be consistent in how you do it. When you're running campaigns in Salesforce, they need to be done in a consistent manner. You can't because you're going to create a rules-based system that says ignore invited, but add attended to the attribution model. So in order to have a rules-based system, you have to follow a consistent formula with the way that you execute campaigns. If you don't do that, you're going to have problems. So if you've got 18 different campaign member statuses that all equate to attended, let's shrink that down to just one, attended. One thing that you said here that I think was a huge takeaway is when in doubt, if you can't quantify that something's working, it's probably not working. So that's a good one.
Sorry, yeah.
Another one is that in everybody we've talked to in this mini-series has said the same thing. You do not need perfect data to begin with attribution. You just don't. And a lot of times we talked about the single digits thing. Like a lot of times your data is not as bad as you think it is. And if it's off by single digits, you're fine. You're good. And then that last thing is that single digits don't matter. Doesn't change the way you evaluate the data because we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of touch points. If 3 touch points out of thousands are missing, it does not change the data in a meaningful way. It just doesn't. So stop worrying about single digit data discrepancies because they don't matter. All right. Well, Steffen, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It was great to see you again. Always great to talk to you, my friend. So really appreciate you joining and sharing your knowledge with me and our listeners.
Thank you so much, Drew, and thank you for this wonderful geeky podcast.
My pleasure. My pleasure. You know, I love to geek out on this stuff. On our next episode, we'll continue our traditional recap of the series, but with a new guest, my good friend, Reagan Dodson. Reagan is an accomplished marketing leader and the director of demand gen at Refine Labs. We'll go through the best takeaways from this season. You don't want to miss this one. And as always, thank you for listening to today's episode. Like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know if you'd also like access to our private group where we keep these conversations going.